Hello, hello. Okay, so all right, so let's start, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Could you just confirm if you can hear me properly? Hello. Someone please confirm. Okay, it is not audible. Hello, am I audible? Okay, so let's start. Okay, pardon that, I'll be doing that a lot because I've got a pretty serious case of cold. But apart from that, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope more people join in because as of now, I guess we are just, I don't know how many people. We are 6 people or something right now, and I hope we get a little more than that. Otherwise, sort of the entire point is being beaten off. Okay, 7 people. That's nice. People are growing. That's interesting. Okay, so let's start. I don't know. Should I start? Like, what do you guys think? Tell me. Yeah? Tell me what you guys think. Should we start or should we wait some more? Okay. So, let's get started. You see, we are humans, right? And they say that humans are the supreme creation of God. The question is, why is it so that people say that humans are the supreme creation of God? And the answer is because we have the capacity to think. Intelligence is what makes humans so special as compared to other creations. But you see, day after day, we are heading to a social structure, a society where, people don't exactly think for themselves. And it is very obvious at various aspects of life, a personal life or the social life or the political life, economic status as well. You see, no matter where you look, you will find people not being able to think. Like, I'll give you a very specific example. So I teach a couple students, and there's this student I teach. He is in class 8, and this just yesterday actually, I went to teach him, and there was a problem which read, find the product of the cube of -2 and the square of +4. And I believe that is a very simple question. You see, when you know what exponents are, there isn't a lot in that question. But the problem is that student, that little child, was not able to understand what that question means. Now that's where the problem is. See, I asked him, tell me what the question means, and he literally reads the question again and again. And then I ask him, tell me what do you mean by product? And he says, product is something, anything is a product. So, like, tell me what is a cube? And he said, a cube is a shape which is like a cuboid. Well, you see, this is how bad the state is of the education these days. People just go to schools, take in lectures, mug some things up, sit in the exam, grab that out, and that's it. They are not trying to understand anything. And over the years, these students, time after time, year after year, just keep going into higher classes, and at a certain point, they come at a stage where you cannot teach them anything properly. That's how bad the education is these days. So that brings us to one big question, what is education? And the answer that I find oftentimes is education is a process of passing knowledge over to the next generation. And it is, in fact, quite true. That is what education is supposed to be. I wouldn't say that is what education these days is. That is what education is supposed to be. And this way, if you are passing knowledge and knowledge is the defining feature of the humans, then education becomes a defining feature of the human race, of the human society. And yet, when you are a teacher and you walk into a class and you ask the question, how many of you came to the class today to learn something new? And you get a very shameful response. And we all know what we are going to get after that question. The thing is, we wouldn't want to admit the fact that people do not associate learning with education. Education is something different, learning is something different. So, if people at an institution of learning do not understand what learning means, something is awfully wrong with the education system. So, why is it in such a bad state? That's one big question we might have. What, why is it failing so badly? But when you ask this question, you are face to face with certain other questions like, what is it failing at, or what is the purpose of the education system, right? What is the point of the education system? And to this, different people might have different answers. Like, uh, you can give me a very pragmatic, a practical answer, which is, education is to get a job. And what happens when you get a job? It gives you financial security. And after that, well, you get educated, you get a job, you get a financial security, you get a life for yourself, and then you put your children back into the same system. What's the point of this? Like, if you look at it that way, education is just a medium to promote the propagation of the species, of the human race. But again, you see, there are single celled organisms, and there are lots of other animals as well. Some animals that have existed since before the humans, and they have propagated their species pretty well without any education. So the point is education doesn't exactly have to be a medium of the propagation of species. So what other purpose could education have? The other answer you get often is uh, education should be holistic. You see this word very often in the pro schools, colleges, and stuff like that. Holistic education. What does this mean? So, well, here they say holistic education is about, you know, uh, creating the best minds in the respective fields. That's the term they use. Okay, could you just confirm if this is going fine? Because I'm seeing either way. I guess this is working fine. So I'll continue then. Okay, so yeah. So they say holistic education is to create the best minds in the respective fields. I mean, you see, we have Nobel laureates, we have Olympic medalists. Now, there is one point to notice that since independence in 1947, India doesn't have even one Nobel laureate in science. And by that, I do not mean an American Indian, like an American guy with Indian origin. No, I mean a complete Indian. An Indian, a guy who earned Nobel for or in favor of the Indian education system. We do not have a single case like that. US has 100 plus. We have only 26 Olympic medals, whereas China won 100 only in 2008 Olympic Games. So this is how it is going. This is how bad it is. We say that we are promoting holistic education, but things are rather on the gloomy side. We're not creating the best minds in the respective fields. You see, people that achieve things, even after belonging to the Indian education system, can often be said to have achieved it despite the education system, not because of it. And this is a very, very rude and yet a very true statement that we all need to admit to at some point. You see, the education system is not doing anything to promote these people who are trying to achieve things, to promote them to achieve greater things. The system is only trying to impede them. And these people have to cross the system as a hurdle. This is not how it should be. The system should be more like an escalator that takes you to greater heights. Whereas here the system acts like a hurdle. So that's one thing. But that brings us back to the same question. What is the point of the education system then? To understand this, let's go back in time to 1800s when the industrial revolution was in full swing. And you know what this time period means for India? Yes, the East India Company. They came to India and freshly started their business. We know what kind of business. Let's not get into that. But they had one problem. The same problem that most couples have these days, communication. So these Britishers, English-speaking people, had a communication problem with these Indians who do not speak English in the first place. Moreover, have different languages in different states and different localities. So it's kind of hard to communicate with these people for them. So they actually wanted to build a medium of communication. Okay, so for that they needed an education system. Now India was a big place. There's a huge spectrum of culture, language, and such things. So it wasn't an easy solution as constitute a school and you're done. So thing needs to be a bit more sophisticated on this end. So one man, Thomas Babington Macaulay, was asked to go to India and see what needs to be done and do that. That is Macaulay, by the way. Now this guy was an English historian and a genius with an IQ of about 180. There's a legend about him that he could learn any language in a fortnight. That is 15 days. He could learn any language in 15 days. Now he wasn't exactly happy to come to India. Maybe because back in those days, journey from England to India didn't involve attractive air hostesses. I don't know, maybe. So these British people, they gave him £10,000. If you convert that money to today's values, it's £500,000. Now, trust me, if someone gave me £500,000, I would go to North Korea. This is still India. So he came and he spent 4 years and he did not bother learning a single Indian language. And then he went back. He circulated a memorandum called Minute to Indian Education. And there he wrote, and I quote, "It is, I believe, no exaggeration to say that all the historical information which has been collected from all the books written in the Sanskrit language is less valuable than what may be found in the most paltry abridgments used at the preparatory schools in England." Slight superiority complex, you see. Very subtle superiority complex. You might miss it. So I just said that. Sorry. Now, this was a statement that was unacceptable to so many people at so many levels. But in the end, Macaulay had his way. He got what he wanted, and English Education Act was passed in 1835. Now, for this act, English was made the medium of instruction, and Oriental institutes, which means schools or colleges that were not exactly affiliated or controlled by the English methodology, were stopped. The textbooks and anything else used were in English. Okay, so these were certain features that came into place after the English Education Act, 1835. Now, there's a funny thing, He said in the British Parliament, "We need to teach Indians English. If we do not teach them English, they are going to waste their youth touching a cow's ass." He literally said this thing in the British Parliament. And he said that on 2nd February 1835. So this is pretty much 186th anniversary of the day this whole mess with Indian education started to happen. High time we actually opened our eyes about this and did something. And this is what this whole thing today is about, mostly. Now, Macaulay's education had a core philosophy. He said, education should be utilitarian. Like, take a look at the point. He says, education must serve some purpose. Now, England had factories coming up, it was the Industrial Revolution. So they needed people who could work in factories. They needed clerks who could do what was being told, just do what is being told and not think. That was the core idea of a utilitarian education. To not think. Now, does that sound familiar? Not think. An education system that is intended to train people to do what is told and not think. Well, to be very honest, this is what we get these days. People get trained to mug up and crap out and not think. So, either way. So, how does this kind of an education system work? Well, first of all, this brings us to a point where, uh, okay, so it brings us to our first big question. You see, why does this kind of a system work? The idea of syllabus is the key here. Let me ask you this one thing. How many of you know the practical use of, creating a certain isomer um, of a certain organic compound? You definitely learned this kind of a thing, you know, in your chemistry courses in 10, 11, 12, if you are at that level, or if you're not, then you would. The point is, how many of you can tell me the practical use of that? I'll wait for this. Like, let me know in the live chat. How many of you can tell me the practical use of being able to make a certain compound? Exactly. Now, since I'm expecting a lot of you to be involved with maths and physics, so I didn't bring the real big question. But you see, if this was, if I was, or, the expected audience here would be of some other stream other than physics or math, the question would be, can you tell me the practical use of calculus? And believe me, you would not be able to. Now, as a physicist or a mathematician, you might have an answer to that. So I do not exactly want to bring that up right away. But to everyone else who is not doing physics or math for a living, they do not know the practical use of calculus. The situation is so bad that you go into Google and you type the words, what is the practical? And you would see in the suggestions, what is the practical use of calculus? What is the practical use of differentiation? What is the practical use of integration? That brings you to 2 points. First, Google is getting increasingly better at reading our minds. And second, nobody really understands why they learn calculus, but people still learn it year after year for decades now. People have learned calculus, but they do not know why. Now, that clearly tells you, if you didn't already know, that the education system is entirely based on the retention of information. It is not about understanding so much as it is about memorizing. Let me take you to a very quick scenario, okay? This is 2009, okay? And you are a first year student in an engineering course. So you buy a smartphone, a very expensive smartphone, and its special feature is that it comes with Android. And yes, Androids were available in 2009, and even I did not know until I was researching for this thing. Okay, so back in the 2009, the very first Androids came into the market, and you buy one. Now you are flexing that you have an Android in your college, and the problem is your teacher finds you using your phone in the college and it gets seized. or confiscated. Now, when something gets confiscated in colleges, the general rule is you get them back when you graduate. So, well, your phone gets confiscated, and 4 years later, in 2013, you graduate and you get your Android back. Now it's 2013, and everyone, and literally everyone has Android KitKat version 4.4. So one, your Android is outdated and therefore of practically no use. And second, you cannot flex anymore. And the same happens with the education. You mug something up in 2009, and by the time you graduate, it's useless. Now, that doesn't mean you don't study things that were relevant in 2009. But the point is, when you study something, the core idea is to understand it, absorb it. But you do not do that. You memorize it. And as a result, by the time you graduate, it becomes irrelevant and you are incapable of upgrading. But if you did absorb the content, the idea, the concepts, you would be easily able to upgrade it to the recent market trends. I'll tell you a very real example in this case. You see, a lot of us graduated with physics honors, you know, from University of Calcutta this year, and we are hopefully the like pretty much the last batch of the year system. Okay, so we had to learn a certain thing called C. It's a programming language if you do not know, and it's arguably the first high-level programming language with a spectrum of use that goes, beyond a certain tech guy. And if you know a little about programming languages, you would know that C is a procedure-oriented programming languages. And again, if you know something about programming languages, you already know why it is not very efficient. But the thing is, with time we got new programming languages. We had Java, we had C++, but somehow the University of Calcutta did not bother upgrading. They were happy with C for whatever reasons, and to a certain extent, it was okay, I believe. But then suddenly, something crawled in to the market of programming languages. And I literally mean crawled in, and you know what I'm talking about. Yes, Python. The Python comes in, and this dude, this programming language, changes the very idea of programming. Now, it has certainly a lot of benefits as compared to C, but I don't want to get into that. I'll tell you why C is better than Python. It is faster, lighter, and has more security loopholes. So that associates with three use cases: writing operating systems like Windows, Linux. In fact, these are written in C. Game development and hacking. In almost every other aspect, Python has beaten C. Now, I'd like you to tell me how many physicists do you come across who use any of these three cases: writing operating system, developing games, and hacking? Not many, right? So, for the practical purpose of a physicist, the benefits of C are irrelevant as compared to the benefits Python is offering. And that is the key. In fact, it was so obvious that in 2013 CBSE stopped teaching its students C++ in class 11 and 12, and they started teaching them Python, like from the batch that started in 2013. But The University of Calcutta still stuck to C until 2020. That brings us to our next questions. Why was this kind of a situation happening? You know, when something is obviously irrelevant and yet was totally accepted. Because you see, we were not training teachers, policymakers, or people to actually take care of the education system. We were training clerks. They were doing what has been done, how it has been done, without thinking. Okay, we teach C, so we will teach C. Just because we teach C, we will be teaching C. No one sitting there is actually even trying to think that we need to upgrade to Python because they're not bothered. That is not a part of their job, according to them. Their part of the job is to sit there and ensure that everyone is teaching C. This is the clerk mindset that we have been trained to adopt over the education system. Now, so in this way, I tell you something very personal about me, or anyone in general. You see, someone comes in and starts doing his BSc and he realizes that C is irrelevant and he wants to learn Python because that is more relevant. And what does he get in return? Bad scores. So the point is, syllabus is not making you a physicist if you're studying a physics or whatever. It depends from subject to subject. But the syllabus or the whole thing is not getting you what you want. It's trying to make you what is convenient for them. And that brings us to the next point. You see, importance of things that do not form a part of the syllabus. For example, importance of art, let's say. But before we uh, actually talk about this, let's do a time travel again. Go further back in time. Okay, right back to the caveman people era. So we go to the caveman people era in our time machine, and just as we're stepping out of our time machine, we see two caveman mothers. Excuse me. We see two caveman mother talking, and somehow we understand their language because mothers often talk about the same thing they say. So one mother says, "What does your son do?" And the other one says, "Oh, he's a hunter, He used to hunt deers, but he got a promotion this month. So he'll be starting to hunt elephants the next month. I'm such a proud mother. What about yours?" And then he says, "Oh, my son does nothing. He stays in the cave all day and just draws weird pictures on the walls." Not like it's going to become a defining moment in history or anything. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we know who actually wrote, or in this case, drew history. Yes, I'm talking about the wall art. So you see, even though art seemed to be irrelevant to the people back then, it had more historical importance than hunting deer or elephant, to be very honest. But to people, it was the other way around. You see, art is an essential part of human. But the point is, you do not want a poet running around in your factories. And same happened with the Britishers. They did not want poets and artists in factories or in offices. They wanted clerks and factory workers. So that led to a hierarchy of, education. based on this utilitarianism. On top, we have the STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And then we have the humanities subjects, like we have history, economics, and stuff like that, business studies. And at the bottom, we do not have any space left for art, because art is not utilitarian. Now, that brings us to the next question, you see. Why does this happen? Because we do not understand creativity. We can't teach creativity. Emotion is what makes us human, and art is, you know, art is how you express emotion, and that is channeled through creativity. So creativity is something that, everyone has to develop for themselves. You cannot just spoon feed it. You cannot just open someone's mouth, pour 1 liter of creativity, and okay, now he's a creative guy. You can't do that. But with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, it's more than probable. You give them five formula, if they mug it up, they know how to solve a couple problems, and they're fine. That doesn't happen with creativity. That doesn't happen with art. The art, is creativity. It's more about making mistakes. You try to do something, you make mistakes, you learn from the mistakes, you try again, and then you make another mistake, and then you learn from it, you try again, and you keep doing this until maybe at some point you get it right. Maybe. But that's the thing. That brings us to our next question. We're not allowed to make mistakes. They say discipline requires punishment. Now, about that, let me tell you another story. An American psychologist, Wendell Johnson, conducted a study in 1939. Okay, and this will later be known as the monster study. I'll tell you why it's called the monster study in a moment. So, what this was about is he took in 22 orphans and he made two groups out of them. One was called, two groups of 11 people each, and one was given positive reinforcement, like, he encouraged people, he praised them, he helped them, motivated them for making effort into doing something. Whereas for the other group, you know, he demeaned them, insulted them, punished them for making mistakes. Negative reinforcement. So basically, these two groups were subjected to positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement on their own parts. Okay, this was like, as you can see, this study was to test how positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement has a psychological effect into improving children or anyone in general. So by the time the study ended, you see, obviously the group with positive reinforcement did better as compared to the group with negative reinforcement. Additionally, the group with negative reinforcement developed lifelong, you know, issues, abnormalities. You know, the group with negative reinforcement developed traits, harmful traits that lasted their entire lives. And that's why it's called monster study. The study kind of did horrible things to 11 people. The point is, no one seems to be giving it any notice. People still continue with the same thing. And the education system very largely promotes the idea of negative reinforcement. You see, you're not allowed to make mistakes. You're supposed to learn things, you're supposed to do things perfectly, you're supposed to do things fine. If you make mistakes, you have price to pay. You make one mistake in an exam, your entire career might be ruined. You're not allowed to make mistakes. You have to be perfect. And this, when you're not making mistakes, you're not learning anything new. Einstein said this, right? The only person who never made a mistake is someone who never tried to learn something or do something new. So you're not being allowed to do something new. You're not allowed to make mistakes. And that kills creativity, innovation. So that again brings us to the question, what is the purpose of the education system? Well, honestly, I do not have the answer. But maybe with all of this, I might have helped you come a little closer to the answer. But I can tell you what the education system does not do. It does not help anyone, especially not the students. Okay, so the thing here is, we need to go back up to the philosophy of Socrates. Socrates used to say, question everything, inwardly and outwardly. And that's something that we need to come back to. And you know, if you think about it, that's the entire idea of intelligence. The ability to ask questions is what intelligence is all about, right? But over the time, we have become a human race that does not ask questions, that cannot ask questions, that is not allowed to ask questions. And why? Because authority does not like too many questions. It has been just like this from way back, you know, ever since the human society started having the idea of authority, this thing has been there. People in power have tried to crush education, the ability to grow, the ability to ask questions. Because more questions means harder to control people, assert power over people. And that's one big reason we are in such a huge mess of an education system. You see, this education system has some very distinctive features. Let's go through them. Amazing feature number one, a memorization based outlook as opposed to real learning. I don't think I need to explain this any further. Amazing feature number two, a repetition based pedagogy as opposed to absorption and creative application. You see, it doesn't matter how nicely you absorb, I mean, how nicely you absorb what you learn, how much you can apply it to creatively to real problems to form solutions. What matters is how many times have you repeated the thing over and over. Amazing feature number three, spoon feeding structure as opposed to growth of cognitive capacity and therefore self learning. No one teaches you how to think, or actually, no one encourages how to think. You see, sorry, the education system is all about learn this, mug this up, cram that. That's all. No one is teaching you or letting you think, figure out, process, understand. And we come up to a situation, like you see. Amazing feature number four, boring, cumbersome methodology, as opposed to making learning fun and pleasurable. You see, learning is a distinctive feature of humans. I mean, let me tell you, you buy phones, right? So when you see an advertisement for a phone or a salesman is trying to sell you a phone, a salesman is trying to sell you a phone, you see, they do not tell you how boring or how hard it is going to be to use the phone, how sophisticated it is. When they sell you the phone, they tell you how fun it is. And that's the whole part. Education is not fun. It's boring. It's a burden on the students. So naturally, no one wants to learn. No one wants to study, and we come to a student pool where education is something that you have to force, and we go see a student pool, that's just mugging things up instead of learning. Amazing feature number 5, negative competition. You see, you might have watched the movie Three Idiots, and you see the scene where Virus has his introduction and like he's introduced into the plot. So he gives a speech about a cuckoo bird and competition. Well, that's all this is about. That's what negative competition is. This education system feeds off the fear of failure. It feeds off the, senseless race to go above, higher. That makes sense? It's negative competition. You see, you know that you have to, if you have to succeed in this education system, you have to, you know, crush some other people. Why does it have to be like that? Because the point of this kind of an education system, is it some kind of war happening? To win, you have to make someone lose? No, it's education. It's for the entire human race. The entire point of education system being a negative competition is bullshit. That something needs to be taken very well care of. Amazing feature number 6, hollow ideology. No one knows or no one cares what is the point of the education system, as you can see. I spent about an hour trying to figure out what's the point of the education system, and I do not have an answer, and neither do you. Amazing feature number 7, narrow perspective. You know, the education system, the people in the system do not care what its point is. They're just there because it's their job. Like seemingly everything related to education, comes down to one word: job. There's something, real nice that you have to understand. Education doesn't exist for jobs. Jobs exist for human society. That's something different. Education makes you able to do your jobs properly. Education is fundamental. You learn so that you become better humans, and as that, you can do your jobs properly. Not that you study because you want a job. Does it make sense? Amazing feature number 8. Sorry, this is 8. Yeah, this is 8. Sorry. Yeah, 8. Okay. So we have a non-spontaneous effort in the system, or actually a lack of effort at all. The point is, no one knows the purpose of education. Okay. So whether it be parents or students or teachers or policy makers, no one understands why they are doing this, the fundamental purpose behind education. So how can you expect them to put in real effort? All the effort is like pushed, burdened. It's like people are doing things because they have to, someone is forcing them to. No one really cares about doing the thing that they are doing with proper quality. Amazing feature number 9, extensive division based on factors like social or financial status. Now this is interesting. You see, this education system is largely discriminatory. It discriminates you based on your social and financial status. If you can spend lots of money, you get comparatively better educational prospects. And if you really want, if for whatever reasons you do not want to or you cannot afford to spend money into education, you do not get education at all. And that is an extremely sad state of things. Think about it. Education is something that is fundamental to humans. Like I said in the beginning of today's video, this whole live, education is what is distinctive about humans, the human race. It doesn't depend on, you know, things like the financial status of someone. If you are human, you deserve to be educated because that's what it means to be human. But this is not how it is happening. We'll come to this in more detail eventually at some point. Now, amazing feature number 10, an asympathetic approach to the students. You see, the system is very largely based on this one fact. Whatever happens, the student is at fault. If you do not score good marks, you are at fault. If you do not land a job, you're at fault. If you're not earning six-figure salary, you're at fault. Try to understand. The education is about students, about making them grow into being better humans. If we cannot provide that to our students, our children, we are at fault. We, the system, or whoever is a part of the system, is at fault. Because we need to provide a proper environment, a proper whatever is needed to the students that we cannot, we do not. And the fault is still of the students. These are the 10 amazing features of the education system. And what do we get as a result? A student goes class after class without even realizing their own potential and construct a society devoid of the central value of humans, intelligence. So, okay, at this point, we can all agree that there needs to be changes, and the thing is, who will bring the changes? How are the changes going to come? Sorry, Ah, pardon this. The live was actually scheduled before the symptoms came in, so I had to do this today. And I hope I'm better before the next live on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. If I'm not, you'll have to suffer with this again. Sorry. Apart from that, okay. So the question is, who will bring in the changes? Isn't it the responsibility of the people we elect into power to make policies, to make reforms? Well, I had, well, I hate to break it to you, but people in power will never improve education because the very idea. I told this, a few minutes back, but the very idea of power is to stay in power, and educated people are hard to control, assert power over. See, the more educated you are, the more questions you will ask, the more you'll understand, the harder it will be to control and manipulate you. You see why people in policy are not going to give you proper education, the freedom to think and assert your opinion. So it boils down to the fact that we have to do this. Okay, take a look at this. The people in power are there to stay in power, and it is only promoted by keeping the people poorly educated because the poorly educated are easier to control, to stay in power over. The second, fixing the education system doesn't give any political agenda weightage because only the educated understand the importance of education and the masses are uneducated. That's why you need to make an educational reform. The very, you understand, right? The very need that there is, like the very fact that there is a need for an educational reform means that masses are uneducated. And if the masses are uneducated, they're not going to give any value to your agenda when you say that you are going to make educational reforms because they are seemingly not getting anything out of it. So it never comes on their agenda. No one cares. That's the brutal reality. No one cares about education and the quality of education. People seemingly care more about jobs, but that's the issue. You see, if you're not educating people, how are jobs going to come in? Because jobs do not, rain down from the skies. Jobs need to be created, and educated people create jobs. Like more specifically, entrepreneurs create jobs, and entrepreneurship is something that needs that has to be, it's something that has to be a combination of education in art, in business studies, in a lot of fields. Entrepreneurship is a very broad thing. Sorry. So that's the thing, you see. And if you look back in history, there has been, like, you see a lot of names coming up here and there of groups that have worked towards education and have always been on bad books of authority. I mean, think about it. We, like, India was not independent at some period, and the people that really tried to, educate Indians about the atrocities of the Britishers were in the bad books of the Britishers. Same has happened everywhere. I just do not want to get very specific about the names here and there. But the point is, history is full of names where if you try to educate people, you're on the bad books of authority because it's breaking their agenda. That leads us to one fact: you're not getting any help from people in power. To fix education, you and I have to come up. We have to put in effort to bring a change. And yes, I agree that it's a lot of effort, but I don't think I'll be able to face my children, 10 years later and ask them to put effort into anything if I am not putting my part of the effort now. Does it make sense? Just because something is a lot of effort, I run away from it. How can I ask anyone to put an effort into anything? So, yes, I have to put an effort into things as well, right? And this part of, my effort, and not just mine, I have people who are doing things with me. So, this part of our effort is the bosons. You see, because I would like to walk into a class and, I would like to ask this question: how many of you came here to learn something new? And I would like to see a response that I could be proud of. I would like to see a response where I feel safe to leave my own children in that class and rest assured that when they get back home, they will be grown as a person, they will have learned something. That's not the case with the education system today. No one is learning anything. So, to bring that change, we are here, the bosons. So, what exactly is the bosons? Well, you see, Walter Lewin, uh, arguably one of the most celebrated teachers, said, and I quote, "What counts, I found, is not what you cover, but what you uncover. Covering subjects can be a boring exercise, you know, and the students feel it. Uncovering the laws of physics and making them see through the equations, on the other hand, demonstrates the process of discovery with all its newness and excitement, and students love being a part of it." Simply said, the very idea of, covering a syllabus and, you know, covering territory, of like covering a lot of ground, that's not how education is supposed to be. That's not the point of education. The idea of education is to make people experience the joy of learning, to teach them how to think and learn. That's all education is about. About learning stuffs, everyone can do that themselves. You need to teach them how to learn things. Like, think of it like this. You go to a restaurant, you're hungry, okay, and you go to a restaurant, and sorry, you're hungry and you go to a restaurant. Now, there are two things that could happen. You are given food, or you are taught how to make food. In the first case, you are given food, they get their payment, done. Next time you're hungry, you have to go to them again. Whereas, if they teach you how to think, how to cook food for yourself, whenever you're hungry, you can cook food for yourself. That's what education is like. You need to be taught how to learn, not what to learn, not to teach you something. You can do that yourself, right? So yeah, the bosons here is, with this idea at the core, the bosons is a community that we hopefully will make into an organization, a more proper organization at some point, that works consistently and ceaselessly towards bringing the change we have been talking about for all this time, change in the education system. The idea is to bring the change in the education system or become the education system. Even if this sounds rude and loud and overconfident, that's what we are trying to do. Because we know what we're doing is right. Education needs to be changed, and either the education that everyone gets changes for the better, or people, we want to be so good that people take us for education. And what do we offer to this end? Well, honestly, we have just started. This whole bosons thing has started 4 months back or something like that. So we have our server, which is a Discord server, which is the home and headquarter of our community at the time. Of course, we are on the other social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, and YouTube as well. But the home and headquarter is Discord. And if you have used Discord before, you definitely know why it is so important for us to be on Discord. And why can we not do it anywhere else? We will have a long discussion about this. Like, why Discord? We have this community of learners who agree with our opinion, our belief of this educational reform. We have real world meets and events done every now and then that you can be a part of. We have our own blogs, magazines, and journals. See, you know sorry. So so with all this, you might be thinking that, well, we are not actually bringing a lot of change. Like, all of these things do not seem to be bringing any change altogether. But let's be clear about one thing: there is no way we can, or anyone for that matter, can bring such a big change. It is on each of our shoulders to bring the change. Okay, so it is on each of our shoulders to bring the change. And what I mean by that is, you, I, and everyone will have to do our part in bringing the change. We'll have to understand that there needs to be a change and work consistently towards a better future. And that's only how this change will ever happen. All we can do as the bosons is continue to, stand on the front lines of this whole thing, guide all the people who are there, who want to bring the change, and make sure that the change comes in. And we will do that. We will bring in a change. Now, we would like to take a moment again to emphasize the fact that one major aspect of the failure of the education system is due to the separate way it treats the people based on social and financial status. No one will ever be no education system or no change will ever be effective unless this is addressed, this issue. Education system needs to be available and accessible to everyone without any discrimination, and that's really critical. And we work with this mission. We are committed to creating an education system that reaches out to everyone, and thus we aim to do what needs to be done and through education make the world a better place to live in. Now, that isn't all. Apart from these, we have one major contrib we have one major thing to offer. But before we get into that, that kind of forms the second part of this entire discussion. Before we move on with that, if anyone has anything to say, any questions, anything, any queries, please let me know through the live chat and let's go through that for a moment. So I guess no one has anything, and I don't even think there are any people watching this. Okay, three people. That's honestly more than I expected, if that is any number at all. But okay, I hope this thing will stay, and I hope people watch it later on, and maybe someday this whole thing that we're starting grows. Okay, so let's move on then. Or should we stop here? I have a lot more things to discuss about, but we could wait around and discuss about it the next day, like the Tuesday live. We could do it then. Okay, let's continue with a part of the course. So, uh, a lot of you here already have been a part of the Bosons, or might have heard about it or come across it in some way or the other, and you might have come across the terms wolf pack or the fact that we offer some kind of courses. So let's talk about that for a moment. Okay, so the thing is, in addition to the things that I already said we are offering, we offer courses, and these are called wolf pack. Okay, wolf pack refers to the thing, the courses that we offer. But before we get into that, we have like you might have a question that you see we are talking about offering courses and bringing a change, but you see if you offer the courses, it pretty much becomes like the same thing that is happening all around anyway. Like, how is it any different? So here it is, the fact that we carried careful research into the major reasons why the education system fails, and we can narrow the problem down to four major points. Let's go through them. First is lack of independence. You see, we have all been a part of this system, and we can all agree that there have been times we have felt suffocated due to this system. Just give me a moment to move over to the right slide. Okay, so that brings us to the first point, lack of independence. You see, we have all been a part of the system, and we can agree that we feel suffocated due to the system, and like we feel tied, chained up, and restrained, and we have experienced a lack of space to actually grow. Right from what to study, when to study, how to study, the system tells us everything, and we have to do it like that. If we do not, seemingly we're not studying altogether. Even though the education is about us, us, the students are the center of this education system, just like the solar system. But we do not hold any power. The power of or the authority is with the authorities. The system itself is taking the control. So how are we the center again if we are not given the space? Excuse me. Okay. And as a result of this lack of independence, the education system has increasingly become hollow and meaningless. I mean, we cannot think out of the box, and we cannot learn freely, independently. And all this comes down to the result that, there is no innovative spirit in the students. It's very much like trying to grow a mango tree inside a pot. It's just not possible, to grow something, you need space. And for the growth of intelligence, you need intellectual space, which is not being given to the students. Problem number two, lack of self-learning. And I talked about this just a few moments back. You see, no one is teaching you how to think, how to learn. They're just telling you to learn this, learn that, and by learn I mean mug up. Mug this up, mug it, mug that up. That's all this education system is about. So, no one is even trying to encourage free thinking. I'll give you a very nice example. You see, I take a random student from the age group of 10 to 14 years, and you know, I take a game designed for, sorry, yeah, I take a game that is designed for people of age 8 to 10, or you could generalize it. Like, I have very specific game and I have very specific people in mind. Like, I actually did this thing with, I did carry out this thing by myself, and you see, I take a child in the age group of 10 to 14, and I give them a game that is designed for people of an average age of 8 to 10, and somehow they're not able to figure their way out around the game. They just don't know what to do. So now think about this. This game was designed for an 8-year old, and if a 10-year old or 14-year old, like something in between, doesn't know how to like do the, like, even figure out the basic idea behind the game, there is something seriously wrong. They say games are very essential for human intellectual development. That's a very hotly debated topic, and I don't want to get into that. But one thing is for sure, that you see, Games are very much like education. They take you into a world and you have to figure out how it works. Isn't that the purpose of the education system? You are in a world, and the education system is supposed to teach you to figure out how it works so that you can figure out your way around in life. That's the whole point of the education, right? Supposedly. So if a simulation of this thing in a game, if a child of age group 8 is expected to be able to figure out a simulative idea of a certain level, isn't it weird if a child of 10 to 14-year age group is not able to process that? That happens exactly because the child is not taught to learn. He isn't taught how to figure things out, how to, test what is happening, figure things out. He's taught to mug up certain formula. And what happens is if I give him a manual of how to play the game, he'll mug everything up and he'll be able to play the game just fine. But that's not the point, right? There is no manual to real world. Manuals only exist for games. There's no manual for real world. No one is going to give you that manual. If you can't figure things out yourself, what's the point of the education? Zero. Next point is lack of the right end game. We went over this before as well. You see, this whole system is, you know, this whole education system seems to have two end games. First, exams and scores and ranks and competition, negative competition, and jobs. And we understand that these are not the correct end games for education and learning. Excuse me again. Sorry. Okay, so that brings us to our last point: lack of interaction. You see, there is no interaction between the students and the system or education system. Now, this education system can be represented by uh, teachers, policymakers, anyone in general, and the students, the learners, and the other, everything else that is in the education system. There is no real interaction happening. At any moment, the interaction is very one way. This system is at a higher pedestal giving out orders of what to do and stuff like that. And these are like slaves. They just have to do what is being told. Whereas that's not how it's supposed to work. An education will only work when both these things, learners and the external factors, like things involved in the education other than the learners. So these are on the similar ground, and there is a very active interaction happening. And there is one more aspect, there is a very minimal educational interaction between students as well. You see, the only like no one is collaborating what they have learned. No one is taught to put together what they have learned into one package and make something real nice out of it. How do we expect these people, these students, to grow up and put together efforts and their learnings and make a better society, a better world, if they cannot do that, if they're never taught how to? That's the point. Understand? So these are the problems that we identified with the education system. And then we sat down, we did extensive research to find methods and solutions to these problems and create a system of education. And yes, I mean an entirely new system of education. Now, something like which you have never experienced before. So we create this education system, and based on this new system, we offer courses, and these are called Wolfpack. So more about how Wolfpack works and why we use Discord. And there is this hype that, you know, Discord is hard to use and it's something complicated. And we will talk about all of this in the next live, which is going to happen on Tuesday, 1 p.m., same time. And I hope I'll be better from my cold. So that is the thing. So the things that you can, really look up to for the live on Tuesday are why we use Discord. We will, myth bust the myth that Discord is hard to use. It's not. Discord is extremely easy and, in fact, really convenient to use. Like once you have used Discord, I believe, nothing will ever be the same. So we'll tell you why we use Discord, we'll teach you how to use Discord, and we'll tell you how the Wolfpack works, how it solves these four major problems. Lack of independence, lack of self-learning, lack of right interaction, right end game, and lack of interaction. We'll tell you how Wolfpack works, how it targets these four problems and solves it, and we will take any questions that you might have again on Tuesday. So I'll see you Tuesday, 1 p.m. Have a good day till then.